My name is Sato Ashira. I am from the Department of Community and Behavioral Health within the College of Public Health, and I am also a part of the Aging Mind and Brain Initiative here at the University of Iowa. My research focuses on looking at the social environment and social relationships that older adults have with others and how these social factors may influence their health and well-being. Before I came into public health research, I worked for several years as a music therapist, mostly working in long-term care settings such as nursing homes and assisted living, working with older adults who were affected by dementia. So although it's been a while since I was in any clinical setting, if I make any reference to clinical settings, that will be what I know and that will be what I will be talking about. So this is my disclosure statement, and I'm going to move on. So today I want to start my presentation by talking about the importance of social environment on health and well-being, specifically about older adults. I then want to take some time to talk about basic social network concepts that we use in our social network research that I think are also very useful in thinking about as we provide care and services to older adults in our daily lives. I then want to talk a little bit about one of my pilot projects that I conducted before I came to this university over University of Memphis that looked at the family caregiving social network systems of older adults who were affected by dementia. Then finally, I want to talk about some of the ways that we can enhance the social environment of older adults, the ways to strengthen some of the social relationships the older adults are having with others in order to help them maintain their health and well-being. So I'm going to start with a concept that most of us know, successful aging. So in order to age successfully, we want to minimize the impact of age-related changes and maximize the positive aspects of life. And as most of us here know, that there are three major components of successful aging. One, we want to be living longer. Two, we want to prevent diseases and disabilities. Then three, we want to maintain mental and physical functioning. There's strong epidemiological evidence showing that if you have strong social relationships, having strong social relationships influence each one of these components that I just listed positively. Thus, by having good social relationships, you can age successfully. Introducing another concept that we all know, healthy aging. So it's development and maintenance of optimal physical, mental, and social well-being and function in older adults, regardless of if you are experiencing some kind of age-related challenges, physical challenges, and cognitive challenges. You should be able to age healthy if you are able to engage in daily projects, if you are skilled in self-care and disease management, if you are supported to maintain independence in the face of frailty, and if you are well connected to family and community. And of course, here is the point that I want to make is that having strong social relationships with your family and friends are really the key to healthy aging. The strong epidemiological evidence also exists showing that good social relationship is good for our health. We know that married people live longer. People who also have stronger and more frequent contact with their family and friends tend to live longer. There's some evidence showing that there's gender differences, meaning that the data shows that men might benefit from being married more than women. And whenever I present this finding, everybody has their own explanations as to why this might be. But regardless of gender, there is a dose response. So if you have higher levels of connectedness within your social setting, then you're likely to experience lower mortality. In terms of cardiovascular disease, social networks tend to provide protective effects. So people who have stronger social network systems tend to have lower incidence of stroke and coronary heart disease. So if you have strong social network systems, you are less likely to experience cardiovascular disease. And if you were to experience cardiovascular disease, having strong social network systems will help you have better outcomes, better prognosis. In cancer research, social isolation has been shown to be related to higher mortality and lower survival. People who are socially isolated do not do as well in treatment and outcomes of the treatment as compared to those who are not socially isolated. For cognitive functioning, social relationships also shows protective effects in terms of maintaining cognitive functioning. And this is because it is said that social engagement continues to change your brain. In order to be socially engaged, you are constantly needing to observe what's going on in your social environment, and you have to be thinking about how to interact with other people, how to respond to what other people are saying. That cognitively changes your brain, that way that you could maintain your activity. So one big message here is that the effect of social relationships on health is not specific to any one disease processes. So it's not just good for your heart health, it's not just good for your cognitive health, but it is good for your overall health and well-being. Social networks tend to also have influence on our health behaviors. It has been shown that socially well-connected individuals tend to exhibit healthier profiles of lifestyle behaviors than those who are socially isolated. So socially connected people tend to smoke less, they tend to eat better, and they tend to exercise more. There's some evidence also on social influence within intimate relationships. So for example, among men, their alcohol consumption tends to increase when they are widowed or divorced. However, it tends to decline when they remarry. On the other hand, for women, drinking tends to decrease when they become widowed or divorced, but it increases when they marry. So this is a good example of how social context might be influencing our behaviors. And it's also a good example showing that social influence can occur both in positive direction as well as negative direction. Another good example would be peer pressure to smoke. So this might be looked at social support to do something together. However, the impact on behavior that's having may lead to a worse or not so good health outcome in the end. So there are two main hypotheses as to why we think social networks influence our health. One is called stress buffering. So stress buffering hypothesis says that social networks provide resources for individuals to cope with stressful circumstances. So we all have daily stressors, so we are constantly experiencing stresses associated with our lives. You might have to take your kids to school, and you have to go into your work. You might have to work with difficult people. The school lets out on snow days, and you have to figure out what to do with your kids. All those small stressors can impact the outcome of our health. When these stresses are there, if you have a lot of support, then you may be able to maintain health. However, if you don't have not so optimal support, or if you don't have any support at all, you may be experiencing illnesses. So if you don't have support, then you don't have these buffers that can help you move on with your daily lives. So that is stress buffering hypothesis. The other hypothesis is main effect. Social networks facilitate well-being whether stress is present or not. This is because it satisfies our basic human needs to be socially connected. As human beings, we all need to be socially connected, and that is why complete social isolation is very bad for our health. So even if there's no stress present in our lives right now, if you're connected, if you're within the social setting with other people, then you are able to maintain your well-being. So a lot of studies have shown that very low levels of social connectedness is very bad for your health. So there's a lot of studies showing high rates of mortality and suicide rate among those who are very socially isolated. On the other hand, some studies have also shown that very high levels of social connectedness may also be not so good for your health. This may be the case when you have so many people around you, surrounding you, needing support or needing help or needing attention. Then it might be very taxing for you to pay attention to each one of them and to make sure that everybody's doing well. In other cases, you might be connected to so many different people, and many of them are experiencing high levels of stress, meaning that by having a lot of people, you are indirectly being exposed to a lot of life stressors that is beyond what you're normally experiencing, that can also have negative impacts on your health and well-being. One of the famous studies showed, this study was with elderly African-American women, showed that it was actually having at least one strong social relationship that was important. Having additional strong relationships, 2, 3, 4 or more, did not have much of an added benefit to the well-being of these older women. However, not having that one person, not having anybody in their social networks that they could call strong social relationship was very deleterious on their depression symptoms. So it's that one person that is very important in your life who can help maintain your health and well-being. Here I want to talk a little bit about some of the basic social network concepts that we use often in our research that I think will be helpful as we all work with older adults in our daily lives and to try to find out how we could maybe facilitate their social well-being and social relationships. So in order to understand social network systems, we can look at social network structures as well as social network functions. And first, I'm going to focus on the structural characteristics of the social network systems. And these are some of the examples of structural characteristics of social network systems. The first one is very obvious: size. Size is simply how many people do we have in our social network systems. So in this example, if you're not familiar with how social network diagrams are drawn, those circles usually indicate individuals, and in some cases those circles indicate organizations. But in this case, I'm going to use the example of individuals, and there are 16 circles in this diagram indicating that network size will be 16, and there are 16 individuals surrounding this older person, the focal person that's shown in red on this diagram. And we want to pay attention to the size of social network systems because studies have shown, and numerous studies have shown, that larger social networks were associated with health benefits and as well as higher levels of social support availabilities. So if you have more people in your network systems, you're more likely to have support sources. If you were to need something, there are usually people who can help you. So if you're trying to enhance some of your clients' social network systems, you may want to stop and think about what is the size of this person's social network systems? In many of my studies, I interview older adults about their social network systems, and I usually ask questions like, if you have important things that you want to discuss, who would you discuss with? So these are some of the questions that we can use to elicit social network members to identify important people in the respondents' lives. And usually in most studies that I've done with older adults, usually there are few people at least who would say, I don't have anybody. Network size of 1, I cannot name any single person that I would go to talk about, or I can't name any single person who would come and help me if I were to need something. And it is a sad reality, but it happens. So knowing the size is very important. If this person doesn't have anybody in his or her social network systems, or has very small social network systems, then we need to be thinking about supplementing what's missing in this person's lives. On the other hand, I also have older adults reporting 40 people, 50 people in their social network systems. That, going back to what I said earlier, it could be positive, but it could also expose them to unnecessary stress and difficulties that we may want to watch out for. So size is a very useful concept that we can look at, and it's usually very easy to assess. So aside from size, we can also look at the homogeneity of the network systems. Studies have shown that more emotional and instrumental support are available in homogeneous network systems. The homogeneity can be looked at in many different ways. In this example, I'm showing that 13 out of 16 network members shown here are female, so it's very highly homogeneous network in terms of gender. Network systems that are highly homogeneously composed of female network systems are usually good at providing care. However, if this person's network system consists mainly of male or mainly by very young generations, maybe grandchildren's generations, this person may be having a hard time getting the support that he or she needs from his or her social network systems. Another things that we can look at is the homogeneity in terms of age. If some people actually have network systems that are very homogeneous in age, so everybody else around this person is similar in their age. In these cases, they tend to get a lot of support, emotional support, and everything that strengthens the peer support. However, people who do not have anybody or whose network systems tend to be composed of families only, meaning that most of those people are going to be from different generations, and they may not have the similar type of the support or peer level support that he or she may want at the same time. So looking at the homogeneity of the network systems can inform you a lot in terms of what kind of support or information or resources that individual is receiving from others in his or her social network system. You can also look at the density. So density means the extent to which people are interacting with each other. So if you look at these diagrams, those lines, each line indicates that there is a relationship between these two circles that the line is connecting. The relationship could be anything. So relationship could be exchange of social support. It could be exchange of information. Or it could be just knowing each other. So when there is more relationships that exist within the network system, as shown in the upper panel here, the network may be denser. As opposed to the lower panel, the lower network diagram that I have on this slide, there are much fewer lines between people and network members, indicating that there are fewer interactions going on between the members of this network system, showing that the density of interaction is lower compared to the upper panel. And this also has an implication, of course, to our health and well-being. Multiple studies have shown that denser networks are associated with higher levels of instrumental and informational support. So you can kind of also look at, if you're trying to work with somebody, one of your clients, trying to enhance the social environment of this client, you could take a look at not just the size, because size doesn't tell you how frequently or how much these individuals are interacting, but you can kind of get a sense of, okay, this person is interacting with this person, but maybe this person may not be interacting with each other. So let's say if you have information that needs to be disseminated to family members, and not just one family member, but everybody should know. If you know that this person's social network system is very dense, so that everybody's talking to each other, it might be okay to give that information to just one of the family members, kind of rely on that person to disseminate that information to everybody else. However, if this person's network system happens to be not so dense, so people are not talking to each other or not talking to each other frequently enough, providing that information to one person is not going to be enough. If you need many family members to have this information, and you might be needing to actually pick up your phone and call multiple family members to make sure that people are getting that information. So knowing how the social network members interact with each other, how the family members might be interacting with each other can really inform you in terms of how you should be working with this family. You can also look at the frequency of interaction between each one of those network members. And you can look at the proximity. This is actually a geographic proximity that we're talking about here to each other. All of us know that proximity is very important. People who live close to us are able to provide a lot of different types of support, including instrumental support or maybe even helping out with activities of daily living, as opposed to people who do not live close to us are not able to do that. They might be able to provide different type of support, like financial support or emotional support through telephone calls, but they may be limited in their ability to provide instrumental support or support on activities of daily living. The frequency of interaction tends to decrease with age, so that is why we do pay attention to those, and this is something that through network interventions that we could try to enhance. We can assess how frequently this person is interacting with other people, including family members or their friends, and this might be something that you can actually try to influence and change if you feel that frequency reduction is not enough. Reciprocity is the extent to which resources are both given and received between two people. And reciprocity happens to be one of the most important functions of social relationships for older adults. So studies have shown that older adults who receive support from others, but who are not able to give back that support that they receive, tend to feel distressed, and they tend to experience higher levels of depression. However, if the older adults who receive support are able to reciprocate and give back to them, then they're more likely to be able to maintain health and well-being. And I experienced this firsthand a lot when I was working as a music therapist, because some days I would go into somebody's room who is crying, and I will try to talk to them, try to find out why they're crying, and I will try to console them. And many times they would feel better after they would talk to me, but many times they would ask me if I am facing any problems or if there's anything that they could help me solve. And I found that when I bring up some kind of issue that, oh, in fact, I was having difficulty with this thing, something very simple that people can solve for me and give back to me, that they were very happy to do so. So it's the ability to reciprocate the support that you receive that makes you feel like you're contributing to the society, you're helping out somebody else, that can have good implications on your mental health. So the structural characteristics of the social network systems that I just talked about are thought to give rise to the functions of these systems. So these characteristics like size and homogeneity and density can really determine what kind of function, what kind of resources each person can get out of this network system. So moving on to the network functions. Social support is one of the functions, and it has been studied a lot, as you probably know. Social support is very important to our health. The definition of social support is that the sender of the resource, sender of the support, has to be sending it with an intent to being supported. There are many cases when senders are intending to be supported, but receivers do not feel that they are supportive. That happens. But as long as the sender is intending to be helpful, we call it social support. But this is another reason that we have a big field of literature that talks about negative outcomes of social support. So we need to be paying attention to these unintended consequences as well as we try to provide support. When we provide social support, then we want to be watching out for what's coming out of that attempt. It's not always positive. There might be some negative outcomes that we want to be paying attention to, and maybe adjusting what we do to help this person. Social engagement is another function of social network systems. The difference here is that in order for someone to be socially engaged, that relationship does not always have to involve the exchange of social support. So even though if you're not exchanging social support, by talking to each other or by sitting with each other, doing something side by side, you are being able to be in social environment and be socially engaged. And this goes back to the main hypothesis that I just talked about earlier, that we as human beings need to be in social setting and be socially engaged. So social engagement can have positive impacts on our health and well-being by just allowing us to do that. Social influence is another form of network function. This does not have to be intended as supportive, but in our daily lives we are constantly being influenced by other people. So we are always being told to do something. We tend to encourage people to do something, or we give advice to people. Those are all what we call direct form of social influence. We are also constantly being influenced by what's going on around us. So there may not be a direct persuasions or direct advice being given to me, but I might be looking at what's going on around my social environment, see somebody doing something, and I might be adjusting what I do depending on what other people are doing, or I might be adjusting how I feel about certain things, or how I feel emotionally even in this environment. That is called indirect form of social influence. So we're constantly being indirectly socially influenced by our surrounding social environment that has implication on our health and well-being. So there are 4 different types of social support according to one group of researchers. And I feel like these typings are very useful as we are trying to provide support to others in our daily lives. So if you're trying to help one of your clients or people, residents in your facility by providing social support, you can think about what type of support does this person need. You can even ask that person, what can I do to help in order to be most effective? I say this because I remember this one example, one situation where I once walked into a resident's room because she was crying, and I wanted to find out what was going on. I wanted to actually provide social support, and I'm assuming that she needs emotional support. So I go in and I sit down next to her and started talking to her. Oh, I'm so sorry you're feeling sad, and I'm here to listen. You don't have to tell me everything, but can I help you? So I'm completely assuming that this person needs emotional support. Then she turns to me and says that I just want someone to move me so it doesn't hurt anymore. So what she actually needed was instrumental support and not emotional support. So those 4 types are: emotional support is expression of empathy, love, trust, and caring. This is what usually many of us think about when we hear emotional support. Somebody's feeling sad, so you'll go and talk to this person, find out what's going on, try to console them so that they would feel better. Another form is called instrumental support, which is tangible aids and services that directly assist a person in need. So this example I just talked about, this person needed an instrumental support, somebody to move her. Other forms of tangible support or instrumental support include providing transportation or helping with ADL, helping with shopping, cooking, and so on. The third form is informational support. It could be advice, it could be suggestions, or it could be information that this person needs. If somebody was just diagnosed with cancer and doesn't know anything about the treatment, this person can benefit greatly from informational support about cancer, what to do, where to go, who to talk to, and so on. Appraisal support is information that is useful for self-evaluation. So many times you don't even need emotional support. All you need to hear is constructive feedback. Or all you need to hear is the words that, yes, you're doing the right thing, you're okay, it's going to be okay, reassurance. So that's the appraisal support. As you might imagine, the relationships that provide one type of support often also tends to provide other types of support. So if you think about your mother or your very close friends, you can think of instances where he or she is providing all four types of support all at the same time. And on the other hand, there will be other cases where there's only one specific form of support being provided. For example, if you think about healthcare professionals or doctors, they tend to usually provide informational support but no other types of support. Depending on what you do, depending on your clinical work, some of you might be providing emotional support and informational support, or some of you might be providing mainly just the instrumental support. So social engagement is participation in social activities through one's social relationships. It is important because it defines and reinforces our social roles, our social identities, our sense of belongingness and attachment. And as I said, this satisfies the basic human needs to be socially connected. And without that connection, without the social roles or social positions, we are not able to make sense of our meaning and belongingness. This is distinct from social support, as I said earlier. The relationships that allow us to be socially engaged don't necessarily have to involve the exchange of social support. And in fact, several studies have shown that social engagement or just companionship is more important than social support in order to maintain our health and well-being. And here comes my example again, but when I was doing music therapy, I often went around the facility trying to recruit people to come to my group sessions. And oftentimes I would say, hi, would you like to come to a music group today? And many times people will say, I will go, I would love to go, but I'm afraid that you're going to ask me to do something. You're going to ask me to talk to other people, you're going to ask me to sing or whatever, which I never force anybody to do, participate. But what they were saying, what they were telling us is that they like to be with other people, but they don't want to be told that they have to talk to other people, or they have to interact with other people, or they don't want to be perceived like they need something to do. Meaning that they don't want social support, but they wanted to be socially engaged. And this was very apparent in not just one facility that I worked at, but many or all of other facilities. It was the same, that people were looking for ways to be socially engaged, but not necessarily wanting to be perceived as needing social support or needing group therapy. Social influence on health-related behaviors and cognition, as I provided example earlier, where social influence could influence our alcohol consumption, our smoking behaviors that have direct implications on our health outcomes. As I said earlier, there are direct forms of social influence where if you want to influence somebody socially, you could be encouraging people to go to music therapy sessions, or you could be encouraging people to talk to your family members so that you can get more support. You can persuade people to do certain things. In indirect form of social influence, that you could be paying attention to the social norms. If you're working in residential care settings, there might be some social norms that are harmful to residents that you might want to really address and change that norm. Again, this is distinct from social support because it's not always a conscious effort to be supportive, and because, as I just said, simple observation of what others are doing can influence individuals both positively and negatively. This is something that we constantly need to pay attention to. Social influence can occur without somebody being aware of it. It just happens in the social settings. And as I said, again, it has both positive and negative implications on other people. Our job is to be aware of what's going on in those social settings, and if there's something negative going on, unintended, that we need to pick that up and try to address those situations. Because a lot of the times, people who are in there, who are being influenced by social influence, are not even aware of it. I sometimes feel that knowing these terms alone can be very helpful, because you might stop and think, there's something weird going on in this social environment. What is it? It's not social support. Oh, maybe it's social influence. Oh, but people are not trying to do it. Oh, it's in direct form of social influence. And, oh, this is what we need to watch out for, type of thing. So just providing some kind of terminology to it can sometimes help you become aware of what might be going on that you were not aware of before. Okay, so overall, social networks tend to change as we age. Social network size tends to get smaller when we age. Social networks also tends to become denser and more homogeneous, and it is because we tend to have more relatives and families within our network system and less of friends and co-workers when we get older. So it becomes denser and more homogeneous. The frequency of interaction with network members tend to decrease as we age, and proximity to network members become more distant. So this is mainly from family members moving away from you as we age. Also, older adults tend to have more difficult time regulating their network systems because most of their network systems consist of families and relatives. What happens in our network system, our daily network systems, is that when we have conflicts with somebody and that conflict cannot be resolved, we have some freedom of not continuing that relationship. So we have some freedom of regulating our network systems and say, okay, I'm not going to talk to this person anymore because she's just giving me a hard time and she's not good for my health. Right? So we have the ability to regulate and cut out some people that we don't want from our social network system. That becomes more difficult when people age, and mainly because if you only have family members in your network system, it is much harder to discontinue the relationship with your family members and your friends or co-workers. This is all to say that we older adults are at increased risk for less than optimal social relationships because of these changes in their network systems. So I want to take some time talking about one of the pilot studies that I conducted with my colleagues looking at the family caregiving systems of older adults affected by dementia. All of us probably who's listening to this presentation knows that caregivers are at increased risk for mortality and morbidity due to physical, psychological distress. We also know that caregivers are less likely to engage in healthy behaviors, thus they are at increased risk for unhealthy outcomes. So in addition to the regular stressors associated with caregiving, such as physical stressors and psychological stressors and social stressors, families have identified conflicts within family systems as one of the major stressors in their daily lives. And indeed, National Alliance on Caregiving conducted a survey published in 2013 showing that 70% of the caregivers who responded to their survey said that they share caregiving tasks with somebody else, meaning that 70% of the people who responded said they had somebody else in their family who also participates in caregiving processes. However, only 9% of those caregivers felt like those responsibilities in providing care to the elderly adults were shared equally. So most people, 91% of the people, felt that these caregiving responsibilities are not equitably distributed among family members. And studies have shown that this perception of inequitable distribution of caregiving tasks have negative impacts on both those who assume more care as well as fewer responsibilities. So people who are providing more care than other people within a family were not feeling good. But people who were providing fewer responsibilities, who were doing less than other people, were also not feeling good. They were also psychologically distressed. So this perception of inequitable distribution of caregiving tasks seemed to have a very important implication on the health outcomes of the caregivers. And of course, your coping resources come from different places. One is the support or resources from family members, other family members, who hopefully will have positive relationships with these individuals. Another source of coping is the support and resources from the health professionals. There's a lot of studies that show that family caregivers often establish strong social relationships with health professionals or formal caregivers at the facilities where their family members are receiving care from. And having that strong social relationship might have good implications on their health. So here it is, health professionals often become a part of family caregiving network, which also happens in our study as well, that we, even without asking, even when we don't ask about professional service providers, many family members tend to include some of those professional healthcare providers as part of their family caregiving social network systems. So in this study, we talked to caregivers shown in middle CG, asked him or her about family members, including the care recipient, CR, shown here. And we also got permission to talk to other family members from this initial respondent. On this diagram, they are shown in pink circles. And so we actually were able to interview multiple family members from each social network systems and gained information about all of those social relationships that we normally would not have. And some of those respondents also included formal care providers at the facility or outside of the facility. There were some privately hired support persons that they had that were considered as part of family social network system. So this was conducted in Memphis. We interviewed 72 family members from 30 families of individuals affected by Alzheimer's disease. We also conducted interviews with formal caregivers who were identified by the families as part of their family caregiving. And these are the questions that we use to identify familial caregiving social network members. So we first ask the respondents to list immediate family members of the person affected by dementia as a care recipient. We then ask them to list persons who are important to this person, this care recipient. We asked them to list then persons who are important to the respondent himself or herself. Looking at their support systems. And then finally we ask them to list the staff at the facility who have been important to you as well as the care recipient. We ask them, after they listed all of those network members, we ask them to list whether each one of these persons participate in direct care provision or care decision making. we also asked about each one of these family and social network members. What do you think about the amount of participation that this person is engaging in? And when somebody was identified as, oh yeah, he or she should be doing a little more or a lot more, we called this individual under contributor. If somebody was identified as, oh yes, he should be doing a little less or a lot less, then we called this individual over contributor. We counted the number of family members who were identified as under contributor. We counted the number of people who were identified as over contributor. And we also counted the number of staff members who the respondent identified as supportive. And we looked at how this might affect that person's depression score. And as we expect, the more family members that were identified as under contributing in direct care and decision making was associated with higher level of distress. Not good, but this is what we expected. The more family members identified as over contributing in direct care and decision making actually had a positive effect on the depression score. They were less likely to be depressed if they had more number of over contributor. What is also interesting is that we also actually looked at how many people are participating in direct care or decision making, and that was not significantly associated with depression score, meaning that it didn't matter how many family members were actually participating in direct care and decision making. What mattered more was this perception that family members are not meeting the expectations that they have in caregiving participation. So that was very interesting. To that model, we added the number of staff who was identified as supported by the respondent, and number of staff actually had a very strong effect on their depression scores. So, and they were more important. So, and another interesting thing is that we also looked at the number of family members who are providing support to this individual, and that was not significant, meaning that receiving support from staff member might be actually more important than receiving support from their family members at this point. So what does this mean? Two main implications. One, perception about family expectation may be especially important to caregiver well-being, more so than how many people are actually participating. Number two, perceptions about support from staff may be especially important for family caregivers. And that is why we think health professionals may be well positioned to provide the type of support and resources that may not be available within these family systems. And that might be why they have such a strong effect on the emotional well-being of the family caregivers. So we just said that health professionals are important in facilitating good social relationships and social environment of these family systems. The question now is that how can we do that? How, as health professionals, can we help family members to enhance social relationships? And here are some strategies. Network strategies intervention. So in order to be effectively enhancing the health protective function of social networks, we need to know who should provide what to whom. So I'm going to start with who. Who do you think you might be able to mobilize to provide support or enhance social relationships? One way to think about is formal. So formal caregivers or formal health professionals may be one of the sources. One thing you need to keep in mind is, yes, you can mobilize formal support source. Maybe you will hire a health educator or a counselor to go and help this person. But it tends to be shorter term. So if there's a program ends and this person will no longer get the support that she or he was receiving, Also, the formal source of support tends to provide more about informational support and emotional support. And also, this is not reciprocal. So formal source of support usually provides things, provide resources, provide information, but they're not expecting to get anything back. So it's not reciprocal. Another source that you can mobilize is informal. So to help this person who may need more support, you might actually go to this person's family or friends and try to mobilize them in providing support and resources. Good thing about informal source is that it can be longer term. So you might work with them initially to help them provide the support this person needs and kind of give them some skills and information. But when you leave, these family and friends are likely to be able to maintain the relationship support provision as they have already learned the skills and they were pre-existing in this person's social network systems before you went in. And this type of informal source is good in providing emotional support. When you're trying to identify who should provide the resources or support, it is good to keep in mind that people who have experienced similar situations are usually the best people to provide that kind of support because they have empathetic understanding and they know what to do. So one example might be if somebody is moving into a new long-term care facility and this person is having such a hard time adjusting, in those cases, the daughter of that resident may not be the best person to provide the support because she doesn't know what it's like to move into this new facility and having to adjust to the new social environment and new people surrounding the new residents. The better source of support might be other residents who have just experienced moving into a new facility and experienced this transition and successfully coped with the situation. Because that person then can tell this new resident, I understand what you're going through, this is hard and this is how I dealt with this. So finding somebody who has similar situation or who has experienced similar situation is usually good. There's some questions about long-standing intimate ties. Somebody who is emotionally closest to this person, to you, may not be the best person as source of support. This is because that person usually have vested interest. Also, very intimate relationships, long-standing intimate relationships tend to have histories of conflicts in the past. And when somebody is trying to go through a hardship or trying to cope with something, that conflicts from the past tend to come back. So in many cases, it might be actually better to introduce a new support source that does not bring in one new other support sources that does not have that kind of conflictual history in the past. Okay, moving on to what should they provide? Yes, one way to do is to actually increase the support that's available. So some examples might be caregiver intervention, where caregiver is feeling like she doesn't have any support from her family members. One way of intervention is to go to her family members and say, hey guys, come and help this person. This person really could use help. So increasing actual support is one way to do it. Another thing you can do is to influence the perceptions. Many times I have worked with many family members as I was working in residential care facilities, family caregivers who were distressed about not having enough support from family members. Once I start talking to them and say, oh, they don't help. When was the last time you talked to this person and what did she say? And kind of trying to get the situation out of this person. A lot of the times I find that all the caregivers themselves will realize that actually she did call and she did ask if I needed anything, and I kind of told her that she wouldn't know what to do anyways, or she doesn't know what she can do, or nobody else can help me, nobody else can work with mom, type of comments. And and maybe that's why they never came back to ask if you needed help again. Sometimes people realize that, oh yeah, they were trying to help, but I kind of pushed them away. Or they actually helped. My sister once came, brought some food when I was so busy providing care to my mom and didn't have time to cook. And so just talking to them about and working with their perceptions and helping them realize that they might be actually getting some kind of support that they didn't realize, or there were people trying to provide support that they unintentionally pushed away, can be helpful. And in these cases, you can then work with this person to come up with strategies of, okay, how can you now talk to these family members, go back to them and tell them exactly what type of support. Is it emotional support? Is it financial support? Or is it just the help in cooking meals that you need, and how do you communicate that effectively to other people? So that is another form of intervention, what you can do with this person. In terms of when, it is important that we are aware that different types of support is needed at different stage of coping. So going back to the example of if somebody is just moving into a long-term care facility, initially at the beginning of that stage, this person is likely to need a very dense social networks that can provide strong affective support so that this person feels a sense of belonging, does not experience the loss of attachment, and so on. That people from previous social network system, family members and close friends, could be calling them frequently and say, hi, I know you moved, but it doesn't change our relationships. I'm still thinking about you. How are things going? That kind of frequent interaction might be very helpful at the beginning stage. However, as the time goes on, this new resident is going to want to kind of get to know other people in her new community, may want to start participating in some of the groups that goes on in this new setting, or some of the activities that are provided, but may be feeling shy. And at that stage, what she needs now is less of the intense, strong emotional affective support, but more of a wider, diffused network systems that provide opportunity for new social interactions. So that might be the stage where you can introduce other residents who might be willing to go and discuss and go and persuade this person to go to different activities with her. Would you like to go and talk to this new resident? I think she might be ready to start participating in other things. Would you like to go and talk to her and maybe invite her to some of your activities, type of thing. There are 3 types of social network interventions. I'm going to go through them very quickly. The first one is enhancing existing social network linkages, and I already talked about some of the examples. In this first type, you can train the members, social network members, in skills to provide support. Many cases, older adults might be feeling lonely and socially isolated, but family members or friends just don't know how to support. What kind of support does this person need? In those cases, you can work with these other people surrounding the older adults and say, hi, here's the way you can talk to this person. Here's the way you might be able to support this person, and kind of training them in their skills to provide effective support. At the same time, you can also train this older person in how to seek out support, how to mobilize the resources surrounding them. This is how you can ask for what you need. Think about what you need. Do you need emotional support? Do you need tangible support? Do you just want social engagement? Do you just want somebody to come and sit next to you? Kind of helping this focal person identify what kind of support, what kind of resources that he or she is seeking, and then helping them with the strategies to reach out to other people. Number two, developing new social network linkages. In some cases, people do not have social network members. Sometimes network systems are very overburdened. For example, families providing care, they are busy providing care, they may not have time for each other to provide support to each other. In those cases, you may want to introduce somebody from outside into the social network systems. Could be mentors who has gone through this hardship that can help guide this individual or this family to go through the stages of coping. Or it could be buddy system. If somebody is wanting to increase physical activity level, then you might buddy up some people so that they can set a time and they can go for a walk together. Another example is self-help group. You can gather some people who have similar concerns and they can kind of get together and try to work things out together as a group. The last type is very effective, but it's very difficult to do. It's enhancing the network through the use of natural helpers. So for this one, we're kind of looking at the setting as a whole. So it might be a unit in care setting facilities, or it might be the entire care facilities. But in these social settings, there are usually people who are called natural helpers. Natural helpers are to whom others naturally turn for advice and support. So there are usually one or two people in these social settings where people go for advice or go and ask for support. And these people tend to be well respected, they're trusted, and they're very responsive to the needs of other people. So one way to enhance this social environment is to identify these natural helpers, then kind of help them, provide them with skills and resources so that they can do what they're already doing more effectively to help others and kind of create an overall positive social environment. So those are some of the techniques that I think we could use and which I have used in the past to some extent in my practice. And here's some final notes. Networks needs to be carefully evaluated. If you are thinking about intervening upon the social environment of older adults, it is very important that you evaluate the networks first. So kind of going back and thinking about some of the structural characteristics and functional characteristics of the social networks that I talked about. How big is this person's network system? Who's in there? How is it functioning? How are people cooperating with each other to do something? Or are there people who are having kind of negative influence on other people? So it is very important that you have that full understanding, because no one generic social network intervention is going to be effective for everyone. Everybody's networks are different. Everybody's needs for support and resources are different. And those intervention strategies that you're going to be developing or you are implementing, whatever that might be, needs to be tailored to the needs of the individuals and the group of people. So going back to the example of it might be that this person actually need the support, physical support increased, or it might be that this person just needs to think through what's going on and change their perception about what's going on in a social environment so that she or he does not feel as bad. Having more of a realistic view of the social environment might be what this person needs in order to feel better. If you were to think about using the natural helpers within the setting to facilitate the social environment of the setting, you want to engage people in assessment. Here I say be aware of self-nomination. This is something I have experienced in person, personally, where when I look for natural helpers or group leaders, if we were to do some kind of groups, we often have people self-nominating themselves to say that, oh, I help everybody and people come to me for advice, and therefore I'm going to be this person, I want to do this program for you. I have done that in the past. It did not work all the time, because in some cases these self-nominators are not nearly the same as what other people, if we ask other residents, would identify as natural helpers. So in some cases they are consistent, but in other cases when I tried, it was not consistent. So what you might want to do is go and talk to many residents and say, hey, if you had a program, who would you go to for advice in this place? Who do you trust? Who is very responsive to everybody else's needs? Who really cares about other people? And get some nominations from other people to identify this key natural helper who is going to be very nearly effective as you try to enhance the social environment of this setting. So this is all I had for today. Just have one quick acknowledgement. The Caregiving Network study that I talked about was funded by National Human Genome Research Institute. And also I would like to thank the participants of our study, the family members who are providing care to older adults with dementia, who are very generous with their time to talk to us about their social network systems. So that is all I have today, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at this address, and thank you very much for your time.